It's time for overtime.
Stop what you're doing and listen.
In the world of sports, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros, with interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with the national champions.
Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime, now with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
We have made it to the end of the work week. It's the Friday edition of Overtime. Welcome to the air with us. Excited to have you along for the ride. We got it all for you today on Overtime, the High Noon Showdown. Just under 1 hour away. The Friday Parlay is back and better than ever. And we are most assuredly ready to rumble into Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals and ready to rumble into the weekend with you as well. Thanks so much for being with us as always. I'm your host, Bert Ramin. You can track me down on Twitter at any time, before, during, after the show, at BertESPN. Hound me over the email, Bert@ESPNSiouxFalls.com, and the ESPN hotline. If you ever have anything to get off your chest or just want to weigh in on the show, that number, 605-362-3776. On today's program, both guests in hour number one. Augie baseball head coach Tim Huber swings by to recap another very successful season of Augustana Viking baseball. A lot of accolades pouring in for the athletes involved in that great season. We'll talk about what's ahead for Augie baseball, recap the season that was at 11:20. 11:30-ish, we'll be talking the latest from the NBA. A tough night, game number one for the Minnesota Timberwolves. How did the team react as they gear up for Game 2 tonight, once again at home? Get the latest there, and then we'll dive in with Darren Wolfson of KSTP in the Twin Cities. We'll be talking Vikings. We'll be talking Minnesota Wild's offseason priorities, and more so than anything else, we'll be talking about the opportunities ahead of and the big-time opportunity seized that recently happened for the Minnesota Timberwolves. The win over Denver, Game 1 against the Mavs, what's ahead for the franchise from an ownership, front office perspective, and what to expect the rest of the way in the postseason from a Minnesota Timberwolves perspective. Darren Wolfson, one of our faves from KSTP in the Twin Cities, stops by at the end of hour number one around 11:40. Hour number two, High Noon Showdown and Headlines. Friday Parlay Live posted up around 12:20. A lot of NFL news to get to today, including one of the premier pass rushers in the National Football League getting a little bit of a reworking of his contract out in the desert. And then we'll round it out with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Certainly a lot to get to, and a big-time news article changing of the landscape, earthquake really from the college sports scene. We'll dive into that here very shortly as we crank it up on this Friday edition of Overtime. Big opportunity in Game 1 of the Western Conference Stanley Cup Finals for the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars last night. This one pushed into overtime and double overtime before it was settled last night.
Off the board, push hard in front, deflected home, and Edmonton wins the game! 3-2, it's Connor McDavid in double overtime!
Audio there courtesy of CHED north of the border. Edmonton wins it 3-2 on the road in double overtime. Edmonton takes a early 1-0 series lead, and so far through the conference finals, both road teams with an early advantage. Panthers at Rangers Game 2 for Florida leads that series 1-0. 7 o'clock puck drop tonight on ESPN. And on Saturday, Oilers and Stars do it again from Dallas, 7 o'clock on TNT. Edmonton again, 1-0 lead in the series. Indiana and Boston, this one was lopsided early, tightened up just a bit, but Boston finds a way to get it done as they stiff-arm the Pacers away in Game 2.
Jaylen Brown moving to his left. McDermott slows him down. Shot clock down to 3. How fitting would this be for Jaylen to finish his perfect night with a 3?
Jaylen Brown, fantastic. He goes for 40 points. Boston takes an early 2-0 lead in the series. Jason Tatum happy that Game 2 easier than Game 1.
Winning the playoffs is tough. It never goes, I guess, how you expect it to. each game is different in its own right. It did feel good to finally win a game too, especially at home. So we understand that New York was up 2-0 and they ended up losing that series. So, far from relaxed.
Pacers down 2-0. Again, probably not panicking, but if there's reason to panic, if you're a fan of the Pacers or just a fan of the Boston Celtics losing, it's because the Pacers' best player a little bit dinged up last night, Tyrese Halliburton. Here's the latest from head coach Rick Carlisle.
He was sore at halftime. He was getting worked on through the entire halftime. Came out and, gave it a shot and, was given all the effort that he could.
And we'll get you the latest status on Tyrese Halliburton moving forward here momentarily. Tonight in the NBA, Mavericks at Timberwolves Game 2 looms 7:30 on TNT. Dallas with that early edge in the series, 1-0. Saturday Game 3, Celtics at the Pacers from Indianapolis, 7:30 start on ABC. And in case you're looking forward already to Game number 3, Timberwolves at Mavericks from Dallas Sunday night, 7 o'clock on TNT. Major League Baseball, the Braves have had the Cubs number. They do a nice job on their home turf, and they take it to the Cubs at Wrigley, winning 2 of 3 in this series. They put it down 3-0 the final yesterday from Wrigley.
An extra base hit in his first 5 games in this ballpark. And he hits a high fly ball to deep right field. Might have just done it right here. That's on the fly and into the bleachers. Jared Kelenic right on cue. Hit a rainbow into right field, and there was a pot of gold on the other end.
That was the 1-0 lead for Atlanta. They would win it 3-0 over the Cubs. Chicago 27-24 on the season. That audio courtesy of 680 AM, The Fan. If you're a fan of the Colorado Rockies, it has been a laughable stretch in the franchise's history. This season no different. You're looking for a new way for them to lose a game. Just give a listen to last night.
And the right-hander ready and throws. And it's low, and the A's have won it on a 4-pitch walk. 10-9 A's with a 5-run 11th.
10-9 the final, 11 innings. Colorado comes up shy once again, 16-33 the record on the year. Other finals concerning AL Central and area teams yesterday. Detroit lost at home to Toronto 9-1, and the White Sox also lose at home to visiting Baltimore. That final 8-6. Today and tonight in Major League Baseball, Blue Jays at Tigers get us going at 5:40. Other matchups, Royals at Rays, Brewers at Red Sox, Orioles at White Sox, Cubbies visit the Cardinals at 7:15. Rockies are home to the white-hot Phillies. That'll be a loss for Colorado. Guardians at the Angels, 8:30 on ESPN+, and the Twins right back in action, 7:10 the start time, 6:30 pregame coverage right here on ESPN Sioux Falls. Twins weekend schedule tonight, again 7:10 the start. Saturday and Sunday, same times. The schedules from the Twin Cities as Texas comes to town. 1:10 the start time, 12:30 pregame coverage, and Sunday night baseball over the weekend. One of the great rivalries, not necessarily the best teams right now, but Cubs at Cardinals, Sunday night baseball, 6 o'clock on ESPN. WNBA final from last night. Minnesota lost in a nail-biter in overtime to the Connecticut Sun, 83-82. The Minnesota Lynx are now 2-1. The Sun are 4-0 on the season. Tonight in the WNBA, the Fever visit the Los Angeles Sparks. That is a 9 o'clock start time. You can watch it on ION. NFL news to get to. Certainly all sorts of debate up in the air about the demise of certain teams before the season even gets started. If the season is as ugly as some people anticipated will be for the New York Giants, Chris Canty has an interesting thought on the future at quarterback and the future head coach of Big Blue.
If you're the New York Giants and you want to turn this thing around quickly, then Bill Belichick makes a ton of sense. He gives your program a level of credibility that they have lacked since they moved on from Tom Coughlin. And even though you know he's not going to stay around for a decade plus, the whole goal is to win a championship, but then also to have sustained success with your overall program. If you have a package deal with Dak Prescott and Bill Belichick, the Giants, in my mind, would instantly in 2025 be the favorite to win the NFC East.
How crazy would that be in that NFC East division if you get Bill Belichick, who that division's pretty darn familiar with just because of the longevity and also the area in which he coached for so long up there in Foxborough, but it would be crazy to see Dak Prescott and Saquon Barkley both on the move within the division. Other players certainly possible. It would be crazy to get Dak and Bill Belichick together in New York, but certainly wouldn't be the oddest fit of the offseason. We'll wait and see what happens. But again, the Giants are make or break sort of season, not Super Bowl or bust. Speaking of Super Bowl or bust, Michelle Smallman has an incredibly long and frankly, in my opinion, inaccurate list of 11 teams. 11 that are Super Bowl or bust this year. Give it a listen.
Super Bowl or bust teams. I came up with 11, and the Lions.
11 Super Bowl or bust teams.
11. The Chiefs, San Francisco, the Falcons.
I'm sorry?
The Falcons went out and made that big move with Kirk Cousins.
Can they get to the playoffs first?
But they are intending to be a team that can compete for a Super Bowl. The Lions, the Ravens, the Bengals, the Browns, the Eagles, the Jets, the Bills. Let's see, what is above? Oh, the Cowboys.
Certainly there's some teams on that list that are Super Bowl or bust, but I want to clarify here. I would love to talk to Smallman about this list because let's detail what Super Bowl or bust really means. Does that mean you're good enough to go and win a Super Bowl, and if you don't, you'll be disappointed? That's a lot of teams. That is probably what she was thinking here. In my opinion, Super Bowl or bust is this. You either win the Super Bowl or your entire team is forfeited, blown up, and reshaped for next year. I don't believe that San Francisco is that team. I think San Francisco is a damn good football team. I think they're one of the Super Bowl favorites. It would not surprise me if they won it. But that organization, the talent, the coaching staff, I don't think they're at risk of losing their jobs and getting blown up if they don't win a Super Bowl. It was disappointing last year, as it was a couple years ago, for Shanahan and company to lose the big game. That stinks. But it's not Super Bowl or bust. I do agree that the Detroit Lions are kind of getting to that territory. I wouldn't put them there, though, because if they get to the Super Bowl and lose, who is really calling for Dan Campbell's job? I don't think anyone would call for Dan Campbell's job if they get to the Super Bowl in Detroit. They're still ascending. Now, on her list that makes a ton of sense, Dallas, duh, that's a Super Bowl or bust team. Baltimore, getting there. The New York Jets are absolutely a Super Bowl or bust team. Buffalo, not so much. They took a step back. I think the expectations are down. Their coach might get fired if they don't go on a deep playoff run, but not a Super Bowl or bust squad. Jets are there. Bengals, maybe, but Burrow's injury gives them a little bit of grace, and the T. Higgins situation, certainly a really good team, but it's not 11 teams. I would say 4 or 5. The teams definitely on that list include the New York Jets, the Baltimore Ravens, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Dallas Cowboys. Those are my big 4, because if Philly doesn't go on another playoff run, another deep playoff run, maybe a Super Bowl, Sirianni's gone. Offensive defense coordinator gone. Future of Jalen Hurts up in the air. The receivers' future up in the air. I think Philly's one of those teams, if they don't get to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, or at least the NFC title game, that could be blown up in a hurry in Philadelphia, especially if it's anything resembling the dumpster fire that they had for the final 2 months of the season. Now on to the NCAA, where we have a settled lawsuit that will reshape the entirety of college athletics.
A class action lawsuit against the NCAA claimed the organization broke federal law by prohibiting college athletes from profiting off their own name. The NCAA and its biggest conferences have now settled that lawsuit. The settlement includes $2.8 billion in damages to be distributed to current and former athletes. It also calls for a new revenue sharing model, which will pay athletes a cut of the money their schools generate from revenue streams, including ticket sales and broadcast deals.
So the bugaboo, the big time, hey, we don't want to talk about that debate over the last 15, 20 years in college athletics. I remember it when I was in school and even before going to college. Why would you ever pay a college athlete? They're getting paid by a good education. That was the old saying, right? Now you realize how much money these big stars were making universities, and these big stars were driving revenue, driving ticket sales, driving advertising. They deserve a slice of the pie, and Paul Feinbaum says on his own show, this is going to reshape things in understated ways, and it's going to create a big-time ripple effect moving forward.
This is the most significant day in the history of the NCAA because the sham that the NCAA has always been is over. They have always fought on every mountain to defend the right that this is really amateur athletics when we've all known that has not been the case for a long time. And finally, they had to agree to it in court to avoid what? to avoid literally going out of business, because had this case gone to trial, they would have been wiped out. I mean, if you agree to settle something for $2.8 billion, can you imagine how much exposure you had? So the NCAA plus the conferences that were dragged into it alongside simply wave the white flag. They have the money. This isn't really to further student athletes, quote unquote, so to speak. This is to prevail and preserve their own ability to continue to be in existence.
The NCAA always said that they had the athletes back, and now after getting challenged in court, they have to have the athletes back, past and present, moving forward. It's the end of amateur athletics as we know it, and I don't think it's crazy dramatic. I don't think everyone's going to get stacks of money guaranteed, but you are going to get some pay for what you do contribute to the sports scene, from revenue dollars, from ticket sales, from merch, from NIL, and I think it's a good thing overall because they drive so much of this revenue. They give up so much of their time, and yes, they're getting an education. But when you think about the overall schedule and what athletes put in, and more so than not, you talk about these big advertisements out there talking about most of us go pro in something else than pro sports. That is absolutely true. Most athletes do not make it to pro, and if they do, the careers do not usually pan out the way that everybody dreams about. So these athletes, the numerous athletes, the 90+% of them that don't go pro, that don't have a pro opportunity, that battle injuries, that battle inconsistency, that try to struggle to find a new home where they're appreciated and find a new home where they can play the sport that they love, that fits their personality, whatever it might be, finally a small slice of the pie coming their way, past or present. It's a good thing, but definitely a reshaping of college athletics as we knew it as of yesterday. It's all changing as of today. Now into your Reliabank headlines of the day for hour number one. The hits keep coming in a good way for Jack Hines. He was honored as the top player in the Central Region as 4 different players earned D2 CCA All Central Region honors for Augustana. Hines and Ashton Mishik were named to the NCBWA All-Central Region team, while Tate Miners and Caleb Sari earned second team honors. Jack Hines earns recognition from another publication after closing the season hitting .445. Had 21 homers, 89 RBI, 77 runs scored, collected 178 total bases, and had an .852 slugging percentage. He was the only player in the country to rank in the top 10 nationally in each category, and he left his mark on Augustana, breaking the program single-season records for slugging percentage, home runs, RBI, and total bases, while adding top 5 marks in batting average and runs scored, hits, and triples. Hines is the second Viking in program history to collect the honor as the Central Region Player of the Year. The South Dakota State soccer program will compete in 21 different competitions, including 18 regular season matches, with 8 coming in Summit League play, as head coach Brock Thompson officially announced the Jackrabbit schedule as of yesterday. You can check out the schedule, follow along with Jackrabbit Soccer at GoJacks.com. The South Dakota State volleyball program has made a pair of additions, adding Megan Roggenkamp and Finley Westover to the roster for the upcoming season. Roggenkamp is a freshman, 5'7" defensive specialist from Rockford, Minnesota, and Westover is a sophomore, 6'2" outside hitter from Busanay, Illinois. Hope I'm saying that right. Transferring in from Western Illinois. Get to know those players as well. GoJacks.com. And last but most certainly not least, let's talk about the game last night. In each of the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, the Celtics comfortably won Game 1 before falling in Game 2 at home, first against the Heat and then against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They flipped the script against the Pacers last night in the Eastern Conference Finals after needing a minor miracle to escape Game 1 with a win at home. When a last-second three-pointer by Jaylen Brown forced overtime, Brown again ensured the series would be different in Game 2 last night, finishing with 40 points to power Boston to a 16-point win, 126-110, and a 2-0 lead in the best-of-7 affair. Believe it or not, as dominant as the Celtics have been through the postseason, this is their first 2-0 series lead, and looking to finish it up in due time against the Indiana Pacers. That series will shift to Indianapolis coming up tomorrow night. Those are your Reliabank headlines of the day for hour number 1. Still so much to get to ahead, including more talk about the future of NCAA collegiate athletics. Again, if you missed it off the jump, we got big news in regards to the news out of the NCAA. The Power 5 and the NCAA have settled their lawsuit, $2.7 billion in damages over 10 years to past and current athletes. This will now reshape college athletics as we know it moving forward. We'll break it down further, discuss it further later on in the show. We're taking a break now, coming back talking Augustana baseball, wrapping up a tremendous season with head coach Tim Huber. That's next on Overtime.
College hoops and NBA basketball, the NFL and Major League Baseball. It's all here on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you on this Friday edition of Overtime. Appreciate you being along for the ride as always, right here on your Sioux Falls sports leader. Time to talk some baseball now as Major League Baseball enters the Memorial Day weekend. It's the time where you can start to make some judgments about your favorite and least favorite teams across Major League Baseball. One of our favorite teams here in the Sioux Falls area, Augustana Baseball, just recently rounded out their 2024 campaign with a final mark of 47-10, another postseason berth into the regional round. Joining us now to break down the season that came to a close recently, head coach Tim Huber. Coach, always a blast to have you. Thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. I think I found a spot. It's not too bad. I'm out at the Birdcage watching some high school South Dakota State tournament here, and I think I'm in a non-windy spot of, there's not many out here.
Well, it's definitely a good spot to be. Love the Birdcage, recent home opener for those Sioux Falls Canaries. Coach, I know you're into the off season. I can tell you stay pretty close to the game. Talk about the season though, when you take a step back and look at it from start to finish. What were some big successes? And I know there were a lot. And what will you take away from 2024 and as you push forward into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of where we're at right now. We expected to have a good year, and the guys took care of business. They just played really well, and 47 wins is nothing to sniff at. I think I learned something. I didn't know this, so we had the most wins in school history this year, regular season wins. And so we did that. We won the conference. We won the conference tournaments and had a nice run. And, you know, you always hate to dwell on the end, but that's what really counts is the end. And we went to the regional and didn't play our best baseball. So, you know, that happens. As they say, you had a bad weekend and we ran up against a really, really good team. But the season as a whole was really, really successful from a team perspective. We had some unbelievable individual performances, and not to mention, you probably will bring this up, but Jack Hines was just named Player of the Year in a couple different publications here yesterday. And I mean, you get National Division II Player of the Year on your team. That's a pretty special year. So there was a lot of things that we have to take away as a positive. And for me, again, it's just our program's in such a good spot right now. It's been a fun run here the last 6 or so years.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to follow along. 47-10, the recent conclusion of the season record for Augustana baseball. You want to look back and see all those highlights and accolades rolling in. GoAugie.com, the place to go. You mentioned Jack Hines, obviously Player of the Year. Also, you got Ashton Mishik, Tate Miners, Caleb Sari also honored. It's a tremendous group for you. I know a lot of these guys have played their last for Augie baseball. Certainly a lot coming back as well for your team. Let's talk about those honorees and the guys that have played their last, though. Going to be a changing of the guard coming into next year, right?
Yep, it's a mixed bag. You know, we lose Jack Hines. Dre Dirkson's our all-time home run leader in our program, and had a rough stretch for us, but he was awesome during most of the year. And Caleb Sari, you referenced, ranks right up there, top 5 in a lot of our career records for wins and ERA and strikeouts and all those kind of things. And Caleb was kind of our de facto ace. You know, as a senior, and so those guys will be tough to replace. There's certainly some other seniors. We had 10 of them that we lost. So those are the bigger names. Some other really talented kids that were pieces to our puzzle, as well. And then, you know, the young guys, we had a great sophomore class. You mentioned Mishik, you know, was really good this year. Ended up being pitcher of the year as a sophomore in our conference. And, there's some really, really, really cool, good pieces coming back, and it's going to start on the mound with some of those guys. J.D. Hendon had an awesome year. Ethan Cole, we expect to do awesome things. Those are all sophomores, and again, there's too many to probably name, but we really like the group that we have returning. We've got some certainly holes to fill, and on the offensive side of things, and we'll see how we can do in the off season to maybe put a piece to that puzzle. Plus, had a couple guys redshirt and a couple young guys that are, I think, ready to step in. So we'll figure that out in the fall.
Coach, I wanted to ask you, because last time we asked you, when we had you on the air just last week or the week before, we asked you about the foundation of the program. So I wanted to ask you a question, hypothetical, of course. Let's say you had a young mentee or somebody on your staff leave to take another job at this same level or maybe down a level. What do you think foundationally is so right within your program that you would kind of recommend to somebody else that's starting over, rebuilding a program? Hey, this needs to be in place. This needs to go on. And this is the kind of characters we're looking for. What would you say to that as far as what has led to your success? But also if somebody you knew and cared about was taking over a program similar to Augie, what do you think they would need to kind of build that foundation right off the jump?
Yeah, I mean, there's not an exact science to it, but I do think there's some things that are absolutes for good programs that you see. And, we talk a lot about, and it certainly starts with finding the right kids, the right people, the guys that want to work. I think athletes, we look for athletes a lot in a lot of different areas, just generally speaking. And then at the end of the day, if you can't develop your players, you're just not going to have a lot of success. And so for us, when we're at the point where we're trying to compete at the national level, even at Division II baseball, it's just as good as a lot of Division I programs out there. And so we're not getting that type of athlete or that type of player all that often that could go to the Division I level. But we always say in 2 or 3 years, they are that level, and that's that development process. So I think at the end of the day, for me, any good coach, good program, you have to have good players to have success. But at the end of the day, I think that you can get really solid baseball players and good talent and skills, and then just it's what does it look like to help them get better and improve. And we're in the Midwest, so our sport is not the highest profile. Baseball always comes a distance, third, fourth, fifth in the spectrum. You got your footballs, your basketballs, and now we got hockey, even more prevalent in town in Sioux Falls here. And so, I just think it's one of those things that we can find guys that have some skills and tools and they haven't really developed it yet, or you change their body. And so the development process, I think, is always important. And when I'm looking for a new coach, if one of our guys leaves, and we've been fortunate, it's usually a pitching guy because I do a lot of hitting stuff. And whenever our pitching guys leave and get a better opportunity, we find someone that can teach it. You got to coach them up, and so that's been a good criteria for us to look for in that role. And Coach Collison Clay he's been a loyal guy. He played for me for a year and then has been with us now since Coach Spielbart jumped ship and went with the Twins. So, it's been a good run, and that's where it starts. It's just the development process. You find the right kids, but you got to develop them.
And it's been a lot of success more often than not for Augustana baseball. Recently wrapped up the season in the regional of the postseason, 47-10 the mark. Head coach Tim Huber is our guest. Coach, I got to ask you, I know that you'd rather be playing in the D2 World Series, but is there a chance year in and year out? I assume that you got a lot of friends in the business, if somebody makes it or not. How often do you get to carry as a spectator? And if not carry, have you ever been to Omaha this time of year?
Yeah, I've never been to Cary as a spectator. I don't know that I will, just because there's always so much to do when you get done playing. When your season ends, it's the later it goes, the more of a run you make, the more you feel like you're behind in recruiting. Like I said, today we're done, and the Super Regional is starting down at Central Missouri, and if we were playing, we'd be missing out on what I'm doing today, watching kids and trying to find the next guy. So that's hard, but I definitely do go to Omaha on a fairly regular basis for 2 reasons. Number one, because it's fun. It's the pinnacle of our sport, and it's not far from Sioux Falls, so it's easy to get there, and it's cool time. If no one's ever been, I would highly recommend it. But then from my perspective as a college coach, there's a lot of recruiting opportunities down there at the same time because they put a lot of tournaments together for Legion and travel teams. So it's kind of a double whammy getting to go down there and you see some games and watch recruits, and then you try to catch a game in the evening or something if you can for a World Series, Division I World Series game.
And obviously it's a fun time of year. Omaha not too far away for D1. Cary not too far away for D2 in the College World Series. Head coach Tim Huber, our guest. Before we let you go, I know you're watching baseball now, so I assume you don't get too far away from the game. Where are you at with your Major League Baseball watching and fandom so far? Because there's all sorts of cool storylines. How's your favorite team doing, and what are you anticipating here as we enter Memorial Day?
I think you and I have talked about this. I'm a big Twins fan, and that's my go-to. And they early in the year, I'm like, oh boy, it's gonna be a rough summer. And then obviously they got hot and had a nice run and won some games. And then here we go again. I don't know. It's been a little bit of an up and down season so far. So yeah, I'm hopeful they can get healthy, stay healthy, and then just see how this group does. It's intriguing for sure. They've got some young guys that might break into the mix and that are starting to get some more prominent roles. And that's always fun too from a Major League standpoint, as you see those rookies, those young guys get their opportunities and to see how they do and how much talent they have. But I follow baseball enough. I would say that's a good point to make. As the summer goes along, I get to watch a little bit more baseball, but right now I haven't paid a ton of attention of who's doing what and who's been good, and haven't even looked at any stats. I mean, usually I look at MLB stats and be like, oh wow, who's this guy? But I haven't had a chance to sit down and do that. That's coming here in the next week or two.
Won't take too long. Ryan Jeffers, by the way, fantastic statistical player so far this year for the Minnesota Twins. Head coach Tim Huber, our guest. Augustana baseball, 47-10. Another great year, coach. Congrats on another awesome season there. Can't wait to see what you guys do next. Thanks as always for the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, that's Augustana baseball head coach Tim Huber. We'll let him off the hook for the remainder of this offseason. We'll check in when preseason time rolls around. But again, consistency is key, and it's apparent there in Sioux Falls for Augustana baseball. Tremendous season once again, 47-10, and another appearance at the regional. Last year went to the College World Series down in Cary. And of course, recent memory, College World Series champs for Augustana baseball recently. Augie baseball head coach Tim Huber there. We'll take a quick break, come back with some news from the NBA. Before long, we'll be talking with our buddy Darren Wolfson of KSTP in the Twin Cities as we round it out. Hour number 1 continues next on Overtime.
And coverage. We are ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you. It is the Friday edition of Overtime. Quick check-in on the NBA before we hit a break and come back talking with Darren Wolfson of KSTP in the Twin Cities about the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Minnesota Vikings, and you guessed it, more Minnesota talk as we check in on the offseason priorities and to-do list for the Minnesota Wild. Some people out there just love to set money on fire and maybe not even get warm while it's burning right next to them. Bronny James is one of the most intriguing prospects in the 2024 NBA draft class, likely because selecting him could increase the chances for a team to land his legendary dad, LeBron James, in free agency. The name recognition is driving an astonishing number of wagers on the younger James in draft markets. At FanDuel, James has attracted 30% of the tickets to be selected first overall by the Atlanta Hawks, the most for any player at the sportsbook. BetMGM reports that the USC guard has 37% of the bets. That's well ahead of Alex Sarr, who is the favorite to go number 1, who has the second most at 14%. James was not initially listed in the number 1 overall market at DraftKings, but found himself in the field as of yesterday afternoon. I'm going to eat this paper if Bronny James goes number 1 to Atlanta. I'm keeping it here in the studio. You got a promise from me. That is crazy. And again, 200-1, the consensus odds for Bronny James. Zach Edey, identical odds. Alex Sarr, Zachary Richache, definitely much better odds. But that paper's going over here because I'll be a man of my word. I'll eat that paper if Bronny James goes number 1 overall to the Atlanta Hawks. Indiana Pacers star Tyrese Halliburton left in the third quarter of last night's loss to the Celtics and did not return because of a sore left hamstring. Carlisle said he was getting work done for the entirety of halftime, came out, gave it a shot, and all the effort that he could. The trainers determined he had to be brought back and be worked on, and then he was ruled out. No update right now on the status of Tyrese Halliburton, but certainly a tremendous concern moving forward for the Pacers. Minnesota Timberwolves coach Chris Finch gave his team an unvarnished view of what he saw in their loss to Dallas in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals in a film session that occurred yesterday. It was a rough film session, Finch said. As a matter of fact, I told the guys, it's been a long time since I've been this disappointed in your effort, your performance, your attitude, your application, and attention to detail just wasn't there. The Western Conference Finals have started. Not sure if you got the memo, but they got it this afternoon, as in yesterday. Hopefully we see those Timberwolves come out with some fire. By the way, latest spreads available DraftKings Sportsbook tonight. 5.5 points the spread in favor of what Vegas thinks will be a very resurgent group in Minnesota. They were a 4.5 point favorite in Game 1 and let that one slide. Game 3, Boston and Indiana looming on Saturday night. 7 points the spread in favor of the Boston Celtics on the road. We take the break. Back with Darren Wolfson of KSTP next on Overtime.
Online and with the app, this is Overtime with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you on the Friday edition of Overtime. You ever miss any of the show? Podcast links are easily accessible, ESPNSiouxFalls.com or on the free ESPN Sioux Falls app. One of the authorities on Minnesota pro sports joins us now on the ESPN hotline. That's Darren Wolfson of KSTP in the Twin Cities. You can follow along with his work on Score North as well, KSTP.com, or on Twitter at DWolfsonKSTP. Darren, before we dive into reaction from Game 1, which was an unfortunate loss to Dallas, are you having to pinch yourself a little bit that the Timberwolves are here in the Western Conference Finals to begin with?
Well, Bert, I appreciate you having me on TGIF.
Absolutely.
It's been one heck of a roller coaster. I mean, they were the number 1 seed for about 4.5 months. So even going back to January/February, there was a thought, hey, this team is fully capable of making a deep run. But then the way that Phoenix beat them in that regular season finale on April 14th, then knowing Phoenix was the first-round opponent, it was the roller coaster. It was like, uh-oh, this is the worst possible first-round matchup.
Yep.
Then the Wolves win that series 4-0. Then they win the first 2 games against Denver. Everyone in that moment after Game 2 against Denver, Bert, was, hey, the Wolves are winning the Western Conference. They will play in the NBA Finals starting June 6th. Then they lose 3 games. First 3-game losing streak the entire season. Think about the tone heading into Game 6. Yes, Game 6 here, but I'm telling you, Bert, I was in Denver for Game 5. The body language I saw in-game, then post-game, I did not think they would win that series. Now, hey, I thought they would show some fight in Game 6, but I just didn't think they would win both Game 6 and Game 7. So they win those 2 games, right? Again, the roller coaster on the upswing, right? Home court advantage against Dallas. Everybody feeling great again. Hey, the Wolves are winning the Western Conference. Then they lose Game 1. Now we're on the downswing again with the roller coaster. So it's been all over the place. It's been enjoyable. I can vividly recall the 04 run. I had Troy Hudson, Gary Trent Sr., 2 guys that were on that 03-04 team in studio with me a couple weeks ago. So reminiscing about that run, you know, to this day, those 2 guys, other people with the Wolves, think if Sam Cassell doesn't get hurt in Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers, that the Wolves were going to win the championship. Not only beat Shaq and Kobe in the Western Conference Finals, but then beat Detroit in the NBA Finals. They did beat Detroit 2 times in the regular season that year, so they felt good about how they matched up with the Pistons. But yeah, it's been a long time coming for somebody that's a basketball aficionado. You know, think about all the, you know, time I spent with David Kahn being lectured by David Kahn. I can cite many other stories over the years. So yes, it's finally fun to cover a conference finals again.
It was an interesting Game 1. Obviously, Kyrie was carrying the torch early for the Mavs. Doncic, who's got that unorthodox style, really puts the nails in the coffin late. What stood out to you about the Game 1 loss, body language, reaction, and otherwise from a Timberwolves perspective?
Well, what stood out to me was the Wolves, the final half. I mean, 35-40% of the regular season. I mean, you know, we can figure out the exact day, but for a good chunk of the regular season, as good as they were in the regular season, Bert, They were not good in crunch time. They were one of the bottom 5 teams in the entire league in crunch time. What I mean by crunch time, 5-point game or less, 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and that also includes overtime. Really, they didn't have that in the Phoenix series. They had it a little bit in the Denver series in Game 7, but it wasn't one of those situations in Game 7. Yeah, it was a 3-point game, under 5 minutes to go, but the Wolves had the ball. Game 1 against Dallas was a little bit different, where it was possession by possession. Dallas goes up, right? The Wolves are up 102-101. Then Dallas goes up 104-102. It had been a while since the Wolves had been in that situation. They just didn't perform well in the regular season in those situations. I think about those 2 turnovers. As good as Jaden McDaniels was in Game 1, that turnover, then Dallas scored right after that. P.J. Washington hits the corner 3. Dallas goes up 104-102. Mike Conley Jr. did not play well in Game 1. His Achilles is bothering him. He's not even close to 100% healthy. Don't know if that was why he shot the ball so poorly in Game 1, but he's turning the ball over late, right? He doesn't turn the ball over, Bert, then he has a turnover in the final 2 minutes. The Wolves had only 10 turnovers in Game 1, but 5 of those 10 came in the fourth quarter. Of those 5, Dallas scored 9 points after those turnovers. That, to me, was the difference in Game 1.
Very costly stuff. Darren Wolfson, KSTP in the Twin Cities. Darren, as far as looking at Denver, that's a daunting challenge. Best player on the planet, in my opinion, in Jokic. You got Murray. You got the mixed bag there. Gordon as well, really good player. What is the difference between Denver and what they do so well and Dallas and the challenge that they present this series?
Well, I think it's Kyrie, it's Luka, and how good those 2 guys are. And, hey, as good a defender as Jaden McDaniels is, and he's had success against Luka, Luka's girth. To me, how physical can you get with Luka, right?
Yep.
Zach Darba's the lead official tonight. What's the whistle like tonight? But just the incredible shot making. We know how good Luka is in the clutch. What I didn't foresee was 62 points in the paint, Bert, right? I didn't think Dallas with Gafford and Lively and Washington, that front court, would have that sort of success in Game 1. I look at the Wolves' girth, right? You think about Cat, Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert. Just look at the weight of those 3 guys compared to the weight of Washington, Lively, and Gafford, the weight of those guys. The Wolves just have this unbelievable girth advantage. That didn't play out in Game 1. But I think it's the 2 incredible playmakers that Dallas has that, hey, Anthony Edwards was gassed. You wouldn't think it, right, with a 22-year-old, but he's asked to do so much on both ends of the court. That matchup in Game 1 against Kyrie, that wore him out. It's not like Luka's exerting a lot of energy on the defensive end. Dallas can hide him on defense, right? So it's how the Wolves can keep up with those 2 incredible playmakers for Dallas, Luka and Kyrie.
Game 2 tonight, 7:30 on TNT. Timberwolves home to the Mavericks. And you brought up something really important and something that a lot of fans weren't thinking about in a little hit I saw on Twitter at Score North yesterday, and that's talking about the ownership, the general manager, director of operations, Tim Conley. There's a lot going on behind the scenes as far as the future of the organization goes that's not on the floor. It's so exciting what they're doing, but how much do fans need to be thinking about who owns the team, who's in charge of the team, and what the front office looks like a year from now?
Well, I don't think they need to fixate on it, but it's certainly on my radar. Now, Detroit did hire Trajan Langdon as its new president of operations, so technically there's not a president of operations job open, although Tim Connolly is so good. Could some team just say, hey, if we know we can get Tim, let's make an immediate change? He does have the opportunity to opt out of his contract. He would be a fool not to opt out of his contract after the season, even if it's to sign a richer deal to stay here in Minnesota. But let's not forget, Tim Connolly is here running the Wolves front office solely because of Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez. Mostly Mark Lowry, but certainly Alex deserves credit as well. Now, Glenn Taylor didn't get in the way, but if that was Glenn Taylor's call, Glenn doesn't hire Tim Connolly. He would have elevated Sachin Gupta. So as you see the ownership situation play out, who will be majority owner starting next season? Will it be Glenn Taylor or will it be Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez? How does the arbitration process? We don't even have an arbitration date yet, but how does that arbitration process play out? Then if Mark and Alex win that arbitration process, ultimately, does the NBA Board of Governors approve Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez as the majority owners? That, to me, is the big question. If you read the contract, it's pretty ironclad. Like Mark and Alex have one heck of a case to be made via arbitration, through that arbitration process. But in the end, does the Board of Governors approve them as majority owners? If they don't, if Glenn Taylor remains majority owner, the Taylor family, Tim didn't come here for Glenn, right? So that to me, Bert, is how the situation becomes interesting. Now, maybe Tim signs a new deal with another opt-out a year from now. Maybe he plays this thing out year by year to see what other jobs open up. But if you're a fan, hey, just fixate on this run. Worry about tonight. I think this will be a long series with Dallas. The Wolves still have every opportunity in a couple weeks to hoist that Larry O'Brien trophy, win their first championship in franchise history. Worry about that. The off-the-court stuff will play out over the next handful of months.
Definitely will. Game 2 tonight, 7:30 on TNT. Darren Wolfson, KSTP in the Twin Cities, our guest. KSTP.com. Also appearances on Score North and elsewhere. When it comes to the Minnesota Wild, 39, 33, and 10, all things considered from the way the season started, not a bad finish. What is on the off-season checklist, off-season priority list from a Minnesota Wild perspective, Darren?
Well, I mean, I think it'll be nice to have a full training camp, a full preseason with head coach John Hines. They need to get Jared Spurgeon healthy. Bert, they're still handcuffed with the Ryan Suter, Zach Parise buyout. That's one more season of being in cap hell, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
Right? So while other teams are operating with an $82.5 or so million salary cap, the Wild are operating at like a $69.5 million salary cap. The big question to me is, okay, Marc-Andre Fleury resigns, and you've got Jesper Wallstedt. Well, you've got Philip Gustafsson as well. Okay, so you've got these three goalies. To me, Wallstedt, he's shown us enough in Iowa. Like, he's ready to be a full-time NHL goalie. Like, if you want to split it 50-50, that's fine. Fleury gets 50% of the games. Wallstedt gets 50% of the games. But that, to me, then means that you trade Philip Gustafsson this summer. So that's what I would keep an eye on as much as anything. It's not like they're going to be a big player in free agency. There may be a move or two on the edges, maybe a forward added, depth-type move, depth defenseman added, but there's not going to be any like big monster changes this summer outside of, to me, looking at trading Philip Gustafsson.
Darren, I don't think we've talked to you since the NFL draft. Minnesota Vikings future obviously is a lot different now than it was a year ago. Kirk Cousins in last year. Now you got J.J. McCarthy. You got the Justin Jefferson contract situation looming. What do you think about some off-season training activity, sights and sounds, first impressions of Dallas Turner, J.J. McCarthy, and what's ahead for the Vikings as they gear it up for 2024?
Well, I mean, Bert, those two first-round picks are really impressive, especially Dallas Turner. Like, even these many weeks later, the Vikings are shocked that he fell to pick 17. Like, of all the scenarios they went through, they were convinced he was going 8 to Atlanta. Maybe he was going to be there at pick 11. So they did bring him in for a pre-draft visit in early April. They were blown away during those 2 days when he visited, April 7th and April 8th. But they just didn't think he'd be there even at 11. But there were a couple scenarios where if the Vikings couldn't move up for a quarterback, if they stayed at 11 and 23, that Turner was absolutely in the mix if they had stayed there at pick 11. But they really thought he was going pick 8 to Atlanta. So I continue to hear just so many good things about Turner and about McCarthy. Like, they were very impressed in their formal interview at the Combine with McCarthy. Now, hey, you probably read some things about, some throws, the little media access we've had so far. Maybe JJ has missed a few throws. But behind the scenes, they absolutely love him. Now, hey, it would be great if Justin Jefferson was here participating. He was here in town for game 1. So he was at Target Center the other night, but he has been a no-show. A reminder, it is not mandatory for players to be there right now. It's voluntary. But I fully anticipate Jefferson will be here in a couple weeks for the mandatory minicamp, but just building some chemistry, whatever that entails this time of the year with McCarthy, with Sam Darnold, with the two new quarterbacks. That would be nice if Jefferson could be here, but he'll be here eventually. I still think the contract extension gets done. I think, you look at the landscape of the NFC North. I mean, I think you can make a case Detroit, Green Bay, and Chicago right now are ahead of the Vikings. To me, that's okay. Like, to me, there's now a solid plan in place. Instead of being stuck in middle purgatory, maybe you have to take a step back for a year. They're going to have all sorts of cap space, top 5 in the NFL next March. Yeah, they'll be competitive this year, right? When you've got Brian Flores running the defense, when you've got Kevin O'Connell running the offense, I don't think they're going to win like 3 or 4 games this year, but I also don't think at this point they're going to win 10 or 11 games this year. So they're probably like a 6, 7, 8 win type team. Probably not a playoff team, but to me, again, that's okay.
Yep.
With all the cap space they're going to have next March, they can add in free agency. To me, this year is all about J.J. McCarthy. Whenever he gets in there, I don't think it'll be week 1. So whenever he gets in there, is it middle of the season? Is it December? But whenever he gets in there, does he show us anything to suggest, okay, everything you thought about him pre-draft is playing out now on the field? Do you see glimpses of how brilliant he can be? That, to me, is what this year is all about heading into 2025.
Very well said. It's all about the future for the Minnesota Vikings, a very promising one. That's everything you need to know for the Minnesota pro sports scene. KSTP in the Twin Cities, Darren Wolfson, always a great guest. Always appreciate the time. Have a great Memorial Day weekend and rooting for the Wolves tonight and beyond. Thanks, Darren.
I think it'll be a long series, Bert. I always appreciate having me on. Have a wonderful holiday weekend.
All right, will do, and you as well. Darren Wolfson, KSTP in the Twin Cities. A couple easy spots to find his work, KSTP.com. Also a contributor at Score North, at DWolfson KSTP on Twitter. That's a wide-ranging update. Everything you need to know from the Denver series. Have you pinched yourself lately that the Timberwolves are even in the Western Conference Finals? Feels pretty special this time of year. Also talked about the ownership, front office influx. Again, don't focus on that. Focus on the moment that the Timberwolves are about to make some history, continue to have a lot of fun here in 2024. Certainly on the radar, checked in on the Wild, checked in on the Minnesota Vikings, and everything in between. We take the break. That's hour number 1 in the books already here on your Friday. And I'll be taking callers right now for the High Noon Showdown, 605-362-3776. You want to win a gift card to get some great meat on the grill. Maybe you need to load up on something new. The all-new Uncle Ed's Specialty Meat's the place to go. I got a gift certificate up for grabs next for the High Noon Showdown. Caller 1, caller 2. Dial me up, 605-362-3776. Let's do it.